Preparing for the AZ204 exam, Azure Functions are a key topic, and in this video, you'll master them all in one place. We have built HTTP Trigger, Timer, Durable Functions, and SQL Trigger functions step by step using both the Azure Portal and Visual Studio. By the end, you'll be ready to tackle any functions questions in AZ204 and build real apps with confidence. So come, let's get started. I've combined all the Azure functions that are meant for AZ204 in this video. You'll have 5 videos coming up one by one, and they're all related to each other, and that's based on the real-time app mentored by Karthik. So don't forget to watch until the end, because that's one of the most important concept durable functions that has been covered. So now it's time to learn. Azure Function app is like a container or home where all your serverless functions live. Each function inside it is a small piece of code that does one specific job, like sending an email, processing a file, or responding to a HTTP request. The function app provides the environment like runtime, scaling, monitoring, and each function is your worker doing its assigned task. The beauty is, you don't need to worry about servers. Azure runs the functions only when it is required or needed, and you only pay for the time it runs. Let's take a simple analogy. So think of Azure Function as a restaurant kitchen. The function app is a kitchen itself. It has all the tools, setup, and staffs to cook. Each function is like a chef who specializes in one dish. Like for example, one chef makes only pizza. Another chef makes salad. Another one makes desserts. When a customer, which is a trigger, an event that we will be talking about, right, places an order, the right chefs starts cooking. So for example, a customer places an order of, let's say for example, a customer comes and order a pizza. So the chef who specializes for pizza comes and kicks in and start making pizza. Now, when there is no order, the chefs don't cook, they just wait. So Azure automatically calls the right chef, which is here function, inside your kitchen. Kitchen is nothing but your function app, only when it is needed. This video is part of AZ204 video series. We were building a lot of stuff with Azure services that is mainly focused on AZ204 side. This website is the website that was built only for this series, and we are referring to this study guide. And if you scroll down now, we are focusing on these sections. As part of this video, we'll be able to set up a Azure Function app in Portal, and in the next following up videos, we will do different Azure functions. I hope you already have an existing login. If not, there are plenty of videos in the channel how to get started with Azure account. For newcomers, it's $200 free. For others, always Azure Functions are anyway free. Okay. Now, when you come to this portal.azure.com, you can search with Azure Function. You'll see this kind of a thunder symbol. If you click here, I already have these many Azure Functions. Like we already explained, Azure Functions are a group of many small pieces of function. So small functions grouped together is called Azure Function app. So every single thing here is a function app. We're going to create a new function app. Let's click on create. And when you create, there are several options. Earlier, it was not having this much of option, but these are the hosting plans. So it starts with flex consumption, and all of the things. What we will do is, because it's just for demo purpose, we will use the consumption plan. But from AZ204 perspective, you should know what are the difference of each plan. So for example, if you consider these two plans, you can see how many scale out can happen. Automatically Azure can multiply your number of apps based on the load. This can go up to 200, this can go up to 1000. This is always ready. This it's like, if you don't use your function app, it can go to sleep mode, but this is not the way it goes to sleep mode. That's the difference. This is for high scalability and the compute choice. Okay, there's a difference in the price, but for anyone who uses Azure Function, 1 million requests is free, which means 1 million requests is 100,000 requests are free. And if you see these things, right, premium function, like you can have these event driven, minimum of one instance required, maximum scale out. App service, like you always pay for a price whether you run the app or not. If you choose this, you'll always pay for the price. And this one is the container environment. So these are the different one. We'll go and choose the consumption plan. So once you select, there's a bunch of stuff that you need to add here. So we were dealing with this many different subscriptions, so I'm going to choose this subscription because that's the one that I'm showing you guys for demo. For resource group, we can create like this. See, RG. So basically you can create RG. So I'm going to create like this. It's a meaningful name. Function app. See, you need to provide a function app. So for example, so this makes us unique one. See, this is a unique one. And you can choose which part of OS you want, because .NET Core can run in both. You can choose whatever you want, depends on company. Generally speaking, Azure Functions can run in Windows, so choosing Windows will have low cost because Windows is owned by Microsoft. Now runtime, you can choose .NET, and it says what are the version. 9 is the version that we're going to choose, and you can choose East US. It's the closest region where this application needs to be deployed. See, most of the users get confused here. Region is like, for example, right, you are running a company. The company is in US, for example. Your customers are going to be in US. So, and not only that, your data generally you don't want to be sitting in other countries, other region, right? So you will generally choose your country. So if a business is running from India, the customers are most likely going to be from India. So they will choose India-based region. There are India-based region as well here. So that's what it is, West India, right? So it depends on what business, who is doing, where they want to deploy. So this is important, okay? For me, this is closest, so I'm choosing this. Depends on what you are going to do in your real life, real project. It depends, okay? Now, we just need to understand this. Next is storage. For every single Azure function, you need to have a storage account. See, it also shows it needs to have a storage account, and it will create if you don't have a storage account. And you can also use this without Azure files. You have to manually deploy. This is fine. Okay, you can manually deploy the code. We don't need Azure file connections. Basically, this is to set up the continuous integration, but we don't need this where the data are sitting in Azure Blob Storage. Okay, now do you want to configure this diagnostic setting? You can configure it later also, but this is the place where you set up the diagnostic settings. Next is networking. You can switch on, and this is not even applicable for our plan. Next is monitoring. Monitoring is like application insights. Application insights are very useful to determine what errors are happening. So we will go with yes. Deployment, I don't want to deploy anything now, so I'm going to choose disable, which is fine. Basic authentication, you have to disable. That's not the right way of doing it, so do not enable it. Authentication. So basically, these are the resource authentication basically. Okay, so it's saying from what kind of authentication it can use. See, if you look at this, for best security practice, use managed identity authentication when available. In our channel, we have managed identity and service principal details. Okay, it's an identity, managed identity also we have explained, user identity also explained, system identity. All of those things are part of Azure important concepts which was already covered in the channel. So please go and check out this, but this is just for the authentication purpose. Next is we have to provide the tags, and then finally we can go ahead and click on create. So once the Azure function is created, we can deploy the code from our developed code which is there sitting in our local. We can deploy it here, which we will see it in this video. Okay, so deployment is done. Let's take a high level of what it is. So we go to resource. You will see a lot of stuffs here, right? To your left side, which is called the side menu, under the overview, it shows you under which resource group it is running, what is your domain name. This is the domain base URL. It also shows about the operating system, what kind of plan you have, all of those information. See some notifications also there. To the left side, what you need to know is about the log stream, where we will be able to set up the see what's happening with Azure Functions. You can see the live stream here. And Azure function keys, these are the function keys that we are referring to. If you click on the function key, there are two function keys. One is the master key, one is the default key. You can use the default key for running a function. And if you come to this overview, under the function, right now there is no function. See, there is no function. So in the next video, we will be talking about HTTP trigger function. Once we build that function in Visual Studio, we'll be able to deploy this to this function app, and you will see those functions here. The other things that you need to understand is about the deployment. This is something that you can set up for the function app to deploy, and these are the settings. Configuration, if you go, you will be able to see the Azure Function app configuration, and under the environmental variable, you will have two things called app settings and connection string. Basically, you can set up those values here, which also will be covered in the next video. All right, and there are many more stuff which we may not be required to cover everything for AZ204, but these are the basics. As we progress with different HTTP functions, as we progress with different Azure functions, you will learn more in this. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions, do post it in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video. Azure HTTP trigger functions are a powerful tool for building serverless application. They let you run code on demand without managing servers or worrying about scalability. This means you can focus on writing the logic that matters while Azure takes care of the infrastructure behind the scene. Wait. I don't know Azure Function itself. First, I need to know Azure Functions. Is that what you're saying? Alright, let's get into what is Azure Function. This video is part of AZ204 video series, and we are focusing on Azure Functions. This is the website specifically built for AZ204 video series, and we are referring to this study guide, and if you scroll down, we're talking about all of these things. So next couple of videos that will focus only on implementation of Azure Functions, different functions that they are required for the AZ204 exam. Alright, now in this video, we'll be talking about Azure Functions and HTTP trigger function. So Azure Function app is like a container or home where all your serverless functions live. Each function inside it is a small piece of code that does one specific job, like sending an email, processing a file, or responding to a HTTP request. The function app provides the environment like runtime, scaling, monitoring, and each function is your worker doing its assigned task. The beauty is, you don't need to worry about servers. Azure runs the functions only when it is required or needed, and you only pay for the time it runs. Let's take a simple analogy. So think of Azure Function as a restaurant kitchen. The function app is a kitchen itself. It has all the tools, setup, and staffs to cook. Each function is like a chef who specializes in one dish. Like for example, one chef makes only pizza. Another chef makes salad. Another one makes desserts. When a customer, which is a trigger, an event that we will be talking about, right, places an order, the right chefs starts cooking. So for example, a customer places an order of, let's say for example, a customer comes and order a pizza. So the chef who specializes for pizza comes and kicks in and start making pizza. Now, when there is no order, the chefs don't cook, they just wait. So Azure automatically calls the right chef, which is here function, inside your kitchen. Kitchen is nothing but your function app, only when it is needed. Alright, let's get into the demo and understand more. Alright, so this is the website and here's our demo. So first let's see what features we have and how functions are going to help us to achieve all of those features. This is the website. I'm going to log in. I have to click on the login, and I'm going to log in as an admin. So myself an admin, and I'm going to log in. So because me being an admin, I have certain privileges. So when you get the code, I will let you know what you have to do. You just make yourself admin. All right, that's the only thing that you need to do in the roles table. Now I'm an admin. Let's say I wanted to create slots. I know two of the users already requested for a slot, even though that was a demo, but I promise once we finish all of this function, I will create the real slots where you can opt for us and we will all connect, because you might have more questions on durable functions. I wanted to create a slot for tomorrow. Let's say tomorrow 5:55, just for namesake, okay, just for understanding purpose. So I created a slot. Maybe I will create more slots. I might have this slot 9 a.m. all right. So if we go to available slots, these are the two slots. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out and log in as a customer, like users, like you guys. So in order to do that, I need to be a user. So I will use a different login, this one. This is based on Google Identity Provider. That's why you can see Google coming in. And I will be covering those things in the upcoming videos for the Entra external ID. Now, me as a user, I'll go and check what are the slots available. Let's say I wanted to take the slot. I'm requesting for the slot and I will provide some details why I want the slot. Fair enough, right? I will submit the slots. And if I go to my request, so I requested for a slot. If I go to my slots, my request, see, it's showing up what I did and it's in pending state. Okay. Now I can't go to any of this admin service, but I'm going to log out. Okay. I'm going to log out. And what happens if admin needs to see what's going on? So I will log in as an admin. If I go to dashboard, I can see who has requested for it. So the person name was TechBlock, which was me, and it's in the pending state. So I can approve, I can cancel it, I can view it. So view is basically if more people opted for a particular one, I'll see all of those people here. All of you guys, when you request, I will see all of your information here. Now coming back to this, here is the place where Azure Function comes into picture. So I can build an API to make this request approved, but I don't want to do that because I wanted to write a small function that approves this. Because we are learning all of these things as part of one application, sometimes I need to make some decision just to utilize certain features in terms of Azure services. So what I've decided is, when I approve this request gets approved. However, the user needs to get an email that this is approved. For that piece of information where the email is sent, I wanted to use the Azure Functions. Okay, so before I click on approve, we need a piece of code that sends an email, and I want that to be an Azure function, HTTP trigger. What is HTTP trigger? HTTP is a protocol, and anything that you trigger like get, put, post, patch, all of these things are HTTP method. So the trigger is you are going to invoke a URL, and that's why this is called HTTP trigger. Okay, let's build from scratch. So I have used the function app, which is already built. All of these functions are built. Okay, so but we will go over one by one. So let's assume you have a blank solution and you're going to create a new project. Add new project, and you will be choosing Azure Function. So I choose Azure Function, say next, and this one I'm going to write this as function app demo. Okay, just for understanding purpose. So I'll say next. So it will ask me what version that we are going to use, and these days only isolated versions are supported. So we are going to use .NET 9 isolated version. .NET 10 will come only in November 2025. So we will choose this. That's the latest one. And here it will show you these many functions. So functions are categorized as input, output, and some orchestration function. And this is event based function. So we can't cover every single of this, but we will try to cover important things. In this case, it's a HTTP trigger. And you see this authorization level. There are 3 authorization level. Anonymous means Anyone can invoke a function. Function means there's a specific function code. At the function level, there is a permission. Admin means it's for the whole rights for the whole function app. So we'll choose function level and we will create. And I'll show you what it is when we deploy this to the Azure function. See, when we created this, I'm going to minimize this. This is the application. Okay, there are important parts that you need to understand. Okay, only those things we will be covering. So what it is creating, it is a piece of code. Okay, this is a piece of code, and here it looks exactly like a web API, but it just has a function name. So this one is, let's say, email trigger. We can name like this. Okay, so if I name like this, I just need to change this. Okay, so let's have some meaningful name. So this one I'm saying, hey, this is a function, this piece is a function, and this is what we decorate. And this one, name is send email to user. Important thing that you need to understand is when it says run and inside there's the parameters, right? This is very important. HTTP trigger. This is the one which determines what kind of trigger this function is going to be invoked. Already I told you there are a lot of web API methods. For example, let's go to this website, go and press F12, or you can also say right click and inspect. This will come. Go to the network and let's say we are going like this. Okay, you see this, there is a call invoked, and this is what called HTTP method. So this is a web API, but it is invoked via HTTPS, meaning this is like, if I, for example, this is get right. If I go here and if I try to do like this, we will not get value. 401 is coming, but you see this is the endpoint that I'm trying to reach via browser. Okay, the 401 is coming because it's not authorized, because it doesn't send the bearer token. But let's keep it short. Anything that starts with HTTPS or like any method, right, they're called HTTP trigger. You're triggering via a protocol called HTTP. That's why it's called HTTP trigger. Now coming back to this, it determines what level of authorization, function level of authorization, and what it is. Is it a get and a post? It accepts get and post, either of, but this one is not get. Basically, we are going to post some information and that information will be processed. Okay, so that is what you need to assume. Okay, now whatever logic you write inside this, it's nothing related to the Azure function. This is a pure .NET logic. You do some work. What work? Sending email. That is the work. Okay, so now I will show you how it has been written. All right, let's take a look at this logic. So again, same thing. It's a different name. It's an HTTP trigger, and logic that we write inside this, right? That's basically is going to do some work, and we will not worry about what logic is written here, because our intention of this video is to understand Azure Functions and how different Azure function works, not step by step of what .NET code that we write. But let me tell you at a high level. So in this one, we send a request, and this one is anonymous, but we can change this to Azure function. Okay, now what we do, we read the request, we convert into this format. What is this format? The user, like when you trigger an HTTP function, you're going to send all of this information, like a meeting slot time, name, user ID, purpose, some information that you're going to post to this HTTP trigger function, and it is going to take, validate, format an email. Like all of these things I will give you. Don't worry about all of these things. It's just a simple HTML that we are formatting. So once you format, we will use the existing SendGrid. For SendGrid, if you don't know how to set up, there's a video in the channel, SendGrid, search for the SendGrid, and probably I will put it in the description also. Follow that to set up the SendGrid. First is 60 days, each day 100 email is free. Okay, they changed the policy. After 60 days, it doesn't work. There are other options. Probably we will take this in a different video, like Mailgun and some other different providers. But for now, let's focus on this. It sends an email. Okay, so it sends an email and then it responds to the caller that this is done. So what else I need to know as a developer? Very important thing. You see there is something called local settings.json. You see there's something called local settings.json. The local settings.json has some properties, like how we have app settings. It has some properties, it has some information, but this local.settings.json will never be deployed in the Azure, which you need to manually place these values in the Azure, which we will see now. Okay, we will see how to configure these things over there. Okay, what else I should know? Host.json. Host.json will tell how long the functions and other things will execute and all of those information. What else I should know? There are other important things. If you look at this program.cs, we have configured few things. Basically, we have configured to read this file and add that as an environment variable. And we also have set up few things for sending email, like how you set up the Azure DI, how do you set up the DI in the web API. That's exactly, this is what we are doing. Okay, so we're setting up these things. So from a developer perspective, this is isolated version. You can go here and check. This is .NET 9 and it will tell you what SDK it is using, what version it is using. All of those things are here, packages are here. And the next thing that you need to know is this part. Other than that, you should know local settings.json will never be deployed. Don't expect any of these things to be deployed in the Azure. You need to configure it, which we will see. Now, other than that, we don't have any fancy stuff. So if I right click on this and say set as startup project, and if I run this, it will run locally. Okay. Now, how do I test? That's the next foremost important thing that everyone might ask. Okay, how do I test this? See, when you look at this as part of this demo, you might see several APIs coming into picture, but for this video, it's just only one. What are we looking at? See, these are the endpoints. Eventually, you will get all of these things. Okay, but at the moment, we're looking at this one alone. Send meeting slot email, and it clearly says it's a post only, and this is where it runs. Okay, so this runs here, and how do I test this? So now I know this, right? I can copy this, but in order to test this, there is something called Postman. You can use the Postman app. Postman app is very easy, simple, where you can, instead of Swagger, you can use all of these things in Postman. Okay, this is one of the testing tool. So I install Postman. I'm opening the Postman. So after I use Postman, I can click on new and add that one. So for example, what else we can add? So I'm going to copy this. Add new HTTP request. See, it's adding empty one. I'm adding this URL, changing this to post. And we have to send something in the body, right? At the moment, there's nothing in the body. So if I try to hit this, let's see what happens. So I go here, I go to this specific function that we are referring to. I'll put a breakpoint here. So if I send this, we are hitting our locally running endpoint. Now the request is empty. So we have some exception. We could have handled it better, but basically we didn't send anything. Something went wrong. So what we do, we come here under the body, click on draw, and basically we need to send some property. Where is this property is coming? If you look at this one is expecting this kind of a model. It has meeting slot ID, username, user ID, purpose, and all of these things, right? See, email ID, purpose, status, and all of these things. So if we send this information, it is supposed to process. Let's hit on send and see what happens. So it's hitting here this time. Let's do this. Okay, we got the request. See, we have all of this request. So I can do this. I can formulate the body. I can check how it is. Okay, so this is how the email will look. Hello Karthik, this is what it is. Nice, right? Okay. Now I can proceed. I can go here. I can send this. Imagine I'm sending it, okay, because that is not our testing. So I'm going to skip this and just run it. What happens? See, it responded with the 200 okay. Okay, this is what it is. So basically, I could have written this in the web API itself, but I don't want it to write. I want this kind of a common thing in a separate function app where, imagine this, right? Not just this application. If you know a common endpoint which is this kind of an Azure function, any different application that just needs to send email can utilize this. That's where this Azure Functions, HTTP Trigger functions comes handy. And not only that, if it takes just 1 second to send, only 1 second, the billing is incurred. Okay, it doesn't run always. Whenever you call this and run, only then this will be running. So it will be sitting just like that. Okay, so now you know how Azure Functions HTTP Trigger works. So now we know how to build a new function in HTTP Trigger function, run it, test it through Postman. Now it's time for us to deploy this to the Azure portal and test that from there as well. Okay, so right click on this function. In the previous video, we already have set up the new Azure Function app, which is what is going to be used in this video. So right click and say publish. Okay, this is not the way to do it, but this is the quickest way that we can publish it. So it's in Azure. I choose this, and it's Azure function, and we did build a Windows function, like Windows thing, not the Linux. So we choose this one. Next, you need to log in. I've already logged in, so it is trying to fetch all of these thing. This is the subscription name. See, it's already coming, whatever we have. Once I choose this, and when I say next, I need to set up a publish XML. Okay, so that's like I said, this is not the way to do it. We will do a CI/CD pipeline for Azure Function. It's very easy, but this is very simple to quickly deploy it over there. Okay, so it's getting configured, profile is ready. Now if I do a publish, it will build this app and it will publish. Okay, this is just for demo purpose. I have already published my working endpoints to one of the Azure function, but this is to show you how you need to test it. See, it's got deployed, and let's take a look. You see there is a function, and this is a function that was there and it got deployed. So when you hit on a function, you can see all of these things, function keys, invocation logs, and other stuff. So we can do a test. This is a post, and this is just a dummy function. So if I just run it, it is probably going to give a response. See, and you can see the logs coming up here. So that's how you see logs. You can also click on this logs and run it. But if you notice this, we are sending the key here. Okay, the key has to be sent here. So for example, get Azure function URL. If you look at this function URL, let's see. See, after this function URL, there is something called code followed by a code, right? So question mark code is equal to something. So basically, when you invoke a function which is protected by function level or an admin level, you need a code. If you don't send the code, for example, if you don't send the code, it is not going to work. We can't avoid it here, but we know the URL. So, let's say I run this without the code. If I run this without a code, it's giving you 401. But if I run with the code, it's giving me results. So that's how the functions are protected. Okay, so these things that you should know. If you go here, it will tell you what this function is, what it is doing based on what was written. This is nothing, so it's not showing up here, but this is a function key, and all of those logs and like how many times it got invoked, who invoked this, everything is going to be shown in this invocation. And let's take a look at one of the other functions. Not this function. Let's take a look at other functions. See, these are the functions that you will eventually learn. All of these different functions you're going to learn. But at this point, this video is done. We know what is HTTP trigger function and how to run it in local, how to set up, how to run it in local, use Postman, how we can deploy this to Azure Functions quickly and test this out. Okay, all right, if you like this video, do subscribe to my channel. Triggers in Azure SQL are like automated guardians of your data. They ensure that certain actions are taken when specific conditions are met, all without manual interventions. This not only helps in maintaining data integrity but also in automating routine tasks that would otherwise require a constant monitoring and manual execution. So here's the idea of this function. So what happens is when a user goes and select an available slot, like they request for a slot, like for example I opt for the slot, so this goes and saves in a table. What is the table? Let's take a look at this. So there is a table called mentoring request table. See, this is the record. Okay, so whenever a record is inserted into this table, I want Azure Functions to be triggered. What am I going to do with this function? As part of this video, we will focus on how SQL Trigger works, but in the upcoming videos, you will see how this SQL Trigger is eventually trigger and durable function, how a workflow is organized, how a workflow is triggered, those kind of things you will see. So for this video, we will focus on creating a SQL Trigger function. So as usual, come to the function, right click, add a function, add new function, and you can choose this function, add, and then it will ask you what kind of trigger it is. In this one, you can choose SQL Trigger. You see this SQL Trigger? It is going to ask you connection and table. You can do like that. I will also show you if you do this how it will end up. So I'm going to cancel it. I don't want this. So we have a separate class called mentoring slot request trigger, which is here. So in this one, this is just a constructor of this class. We are injecting the log factory, configuration, and an email notification service, which is inbuilt service, like the service that we already have it. We are not going to worry about it. So we are going to create a function. So we have a name called function, and we are saying which is the name of this function. Public async task. It is not going to return anything. It's just going to run. And here is the important part. Here we are specifying it is an SQL trigger. We are specifying what table it is, including the schema, and we are saying where to go and find the connection string. Okay, and the next parameter is I read only changes of SQL change of that table name. It's only can read it. It can't modify the table. Okay, now after that we use this inbuilt the method that I already developed to get the database connection string. So it gets the connection string and then it does some work. This gets triggered automatically. Now apart from this, what is important, what you need to do? The very first thing is generally you need to enable the database change tracking. So you have the query under this readme text file here. This says alter database name. We are going to set this change tracking on. Okay, and then we go to this table. We will also enable the change tracking. So we have to enable the change tracking to the database and to the table that you wanted to do. You have to do these things, only then this will work. Okay, why you have to do? Without tracking the change, you will not know what changes are done. Like for example, if you track only, you will know what record was read, what record is the new record. Whenever an insert happens only, this will get triggered. So whenever a table getting inserted, it is going to trigger here these changes, right? It will trigger whether it is update, delete, insert. But we are checking if this operation is an insert operation, then do some work, which we will see in the next video in the durable function. But basically you need to understand how SQL Trigger works. So once I have this request, I can do something. Okay, I'm going to automate this. Okay, so as part of AZ204 video series in Azure Function, there is one of the input bound functions which is called SQL Trigger. That is what you learned. Now what you need to know is where is this SQL connection string is coming. If you go to this local settings, there is something called SQL connection string under the values. So this has been read from here. So let's understand. We need to define the table name. we have to specify which table name, where the connection string is coming, and everything else will work. If I start, okay, if I start this, for example, and if I try to modify this, okay, so what can we modify? So I can say update this, or in other words, let's do this lively. Okay, so we are inserting it, right? Let it run, and then what I will do is I'll go and opt for it, and you will see what happens. Locally this is running. Okay, I'm going to opt for that one record, and we'll see what happens. So I say this and then request. If you look at this, there are two records, right? Ideally we should have got this one, and see, it automatically came. So when we run this, and this time there are only one change because there was one record got inserted. Change, and this is an insert, and whatever we are going to do, we can do here. Okay, so you need to understand what has been done here. The other things that we need to set up is you have to go to this local settings, and you need to configure, you have to mention these things. It's basically the interval of the frequency, like how frequently this has to be read. So these are the variable names that it will read automatically. So you need to specify how frequently this has to be, the polling interval for the database. Every 1 second you can poll, or you can poll every 60 seconds, like every minute you can poll. Okay, so this is the settings here. Alright guys, so this video is done for SQL Trigger, and if you have to specify if you have to deploy this one to the Azure App Service where these variables needs to go, let me show you how things work, how it will be. So let me show you how it will be deployed. So you go to this function and go to this environment variable, whatever you see in local settings, right? For example, you see this SQL Trigger batch size, so you come here and add this. You can come here, add this. So every single thing, SendGrid API, this one, all of these things, including connection string, whatever you see here is being added here. Whatever you see under connection string DB settings, you have to add it under connection string. So that's how you should configure. If you configure these value, only then it will work when you deploy. So because we will never deploy this one to the Azure, you need to configure these variables into Azure environmental variable. Okay, if you have any questions, do let me know in the comment section, and if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Azure Timer Triggers functions are a game changer when it comes to automating tasks in the cloud. Imagine being able to schedule tasks to run a specific interval without having to worry about underlying infrastructure. That's what Azure Timer Trigger function offers, a simple yet powerful way to automate the repetitive task. So in this video, we are focusing on AZ204's video series. So this video is part of AZ204 video series. We're focusing on many Azure functions, and this is all about Timer Trigger. Now we have opened up the code. We will focus only on what is required. So I created a function called reminder function. Reminder functions, nothing, this is all same. It just injects few things like the couple of services and log of factory. What you need to know about timer function is, if you have a function that has a name, the trigger is timer trigger, and after timer trigger it is having an expression. It's called con expression, CRON. Okay, each one is having a meaning. So first one is seconds, second one is minute, hours, day, month, day of week. Each part is representing that format. So if you look at this screen, we have seconds, minutes, hours, days, month, and day of week, and each one has this is each one has a value, and that can be like this, followed by, if you have such expression, and this is what it means. If you have first one as */5, every 5 seconds it will run. There are other different examples based on what you put here. It will run on a different interval. For example, every 1 minute at 0 seconds, every day at 9 p.m, every day at 9 a.m, every Sunday at midnight, every hour at minute 15 and seconds 30. So there are different ways of using it, and there's a okay. So why am I using this function as part of this demo? If you look at this, what I have done is, so once you have the request done, so as part of this video, the reason for this timer function is, let's say it's been approved, a request was approved, so every 5 seconds it will run, but the logic is to check the meeting is before 1 day. So within the 24 hours of the meeting, what it will do is it will check, it will go and query and check whether is there anything that coming up in 1 day. If it is coming, all what it will do is it will fetch some information and send an email to the user. That's what this timer function is all about. So timer function will automatically pick up records, process it, and sends an email notification to the user that this is the meeting invite, and that's it. Okay, so we will run this function only when we need it. Otherwise this function is not used at all. Okay, so this is what the timer function is all about, and in the next video we'll be focusing on very important topics called durable function, and that has a big story, a big workflow to talk about. So stay tuned, and if you have not subscribed, subscribe, share this with your friends. If you have any questions, post it in the comment section. Durable functions in Azure are a game changer for streamlining complex workflow and making serverless applications way easier to manage. They allow you to write efficient, stateful workflow in a serverless environment, which is a huge deal for developers. In this video, we are covering a durable function and a very solid workflow that you will see, and that also in a real world example. This is part of AZ204 video series, and we are going to cover the final part of this Azure Functions, which is the durable functions. So let's take a look at the demo and understand how exactly the workflow is being set up. Alright, let's take a look at the demo. So this is the website. I have logged in as a user like you guys. Okay, so if I go to my available slots, there are 2 slots. Let's say I would like to opt for this. So I'm saying I wanted to do this, and I submit a request. So what happens is, if I go here, there was a record created, and you see this initially it is null. If I refresh, I got an orchestration instance ID that got updated. How this is happening, I will explain you. But once a record is submitted, an admin needs to get intimated. So what I have done is, it first sends an email. It sends an email, and as an admin I should get an email here. Okay, you see this, I got an email and it's just now. So if I open this, it basically says new mentoring slot request pending approval. Let me first put this as a not in spam. It's okay, we are just using those testing endpoints. So I have an email that says that a user named techblock, whose user ID is this. Again, this we can modify it. Okay, this is the slot ID, and this is the purpose, and this is the actual requested on when they requested. So as an admin, I can approve or reject. Okay, now until I approve or reject for 2 days, this will be still running. Once I approve, the next idea is to update the request into this table as approved, and after that we will also send an email to the user that it's been approved. Okay, so I'm going to click on approve, and you should notice what's going to happen. You see this, it's calling an endpoint. This is an HTTP trigger function, and once we call this, the request was approved, and the next workflow is to send an email to the user, which is this one. If I go to spam, I will eventually receive, I just received it. So let's me put this as not a spam. What did I receive? I received hello, this like hello tech block. Here are your meeting details. Your meeting request has been approved by Karthik. You will receive a calendar invite 1 day prior to it. If you remember, one of the functions that we were discussing as part of this video series was HTTP timer trigger. The timer trigger will take care of sending a meeting invite to the user automatically. But approval is what we want. Okay, once you approved, let's go and see what happens to this table. You see this, it got approved on, and everything is done. See, meeting invite email will be sent 24 hours before. Now as a user, if I go to my request, I should be able to see that this request was approved and there's a meeting invite. If the meeting invite is not there, eventually you will get it. Email is sent, it's not even sent, but I can join the meeting invite here. If I say join, it will allow you to join the Google invite. But here's the thing, as an admin, once I approve, I can't do one more time. So if I click one more time, it will say that this is done. If I try to reject also, it will say it is done. You can't do it. So basically, this is the complex workflow that we are setting up with the durable functions. You understood? So I'll repeat one more time. A request is being opted. After that, admin gets an email. Admin can approve or reject. After that, we trigger the next workflow to update the record and send an email to the user. Okay, that is what this workflow is. So I'm going to show you the code and explain you what it is. But before I do so, we have to talk about the durable functions. So what is durable function? So a durable function, it's a special kind of Azure function that helps a long running and reliable workflow. This also keeps tracking of the progress even if something stops or restarts. And this is a great way of doing a retry or wait according to the multiple steps. And we use this durable function because the normal Azure functions can run quickly and have to end it. Only durable function can pause, wait without losing the state. It can also handle the complex processes like approval, order processing, that whatever we were discussing. And it automatically manages the timing, errors, and checkpoints. The key concepts are, it's an orchestration, so it's a brain that controls the workflow. Okay, it can do a couple of small tasks, it can wait for each one to complete, it can do so many things. And how does it work? We start the orchestration, that's the workflow beginning, and we call the activities to do the task, like sending email, updating database, they're all called activities. Okay, and then it can either continue or cancel based on the event or the timeout. Finally, finishing the workflow and sending the notification. So in our case, we saw all of this approval process and denial process, how these things are done. All of those things we saw. Now let's take a look at the code. If you come to this, the very first one is slot approval orchestration. So I'm going to make it a little bit big. So we start with a function, and in this one it has to be orchestration trigger. That's very important. This is the trigger. So orchestration trigger, and that accepts a parameter called task orchestration context. Okay, so this is the signature of a method. Remember that. Now, like I explained you, what it is doing is somebody is going to trigger this workflow, which we will talk about it. Okay, somebody is going to trigger this workflow. Who is going to trigger this workflow? If you remember, whenever there is a record in this table, we saw one of the function called SQL Trigger. Whenever a record is inserted into this table, an SQL Trigger function we saw, right? So let's take a look at the SQL Trigger function that we were talking about in one of the previous video. This is the one. So whenever a record is inserted into the table, we saw how this has been triggered. But once it is triggered, we formulate this information and we initiate the call. We call this durable client, which is this one, dot schedule new orchestration instance async. So we call this method, we name the name of the method, which is this one. We call this method and we pass some information. So this is the place who is initiating the durable function workflow. Okay, record was inserted, this one triggers a workflow. So once it triggers a workflow, it finds that ID and it saves the orchestration instance ID. So whenever a new workflow is triggered, there's an instance ID. That instance ID is what you saw here. This is the instance ID. So we save this instance ID to this particular record. Now what happens? Let's go back to orchestration flow. So the very first thing is we extract the input that was received. You remember the input here. This is the input we put into this orchestration. So we extract it, we call an activity function. See, context dot call activity async. Where is this? It is here. What it is doing? It is a function again, but it is an activity trigger. Only orchestration can trigger this. You can't invoke this. If I run this, you will know what I'm referring to. So this is a piece of function, a piece of code that does something. In this case, what it is doing, it is sending an email to the admin. So from here, we trigger the first email. If you look at this, when I'm running, you can see several functions, see durable functions. You see this? We have these three, and we have one SQL trigger, one timer trigger, and there are three activity triggers: send email to admin, send email to the user, and there is a small activity trigger called it updates the table with the status. Okay, and this is the trigger point. This is the one which is triggered. Okay, so having said this, we don't need this. So what happens? This is triggered, and then you look at this. Once this is triggered, when it comes here, it is waiting for an external event. External event is nothing but from the email. If you remember, we were doing this one, right? Approve or reject, and that was causing this kind of a thing. These two are called approve or reject. Both are actually HTTP trigger functions. So what it is doing is, it is waiting for an action. The action name is approval response. Somebody has to raise this event. Okay, somebody has to raise this event. Who can raise this event? Someone, some function. How are we doing that? That is very important. There are two HTTP triggers. Okay, I'm going to minimize this. If you look at this admin approval endpoint, there are two HTTP triggers. You see this? One is approving, one is rejecting. Both are get endpoints. All what it wants is, it wants the instance ID. So the route is approve mentoring request / instance ID. If you look at this, this one is the function followed by rejected. And if you look at this, this is the instance ID 013C. Let's see, we have 013C. See? So what we are doing is, when we trigger the function, like when we trigger this one, which is an HTTP trigger, okay, it's a function level. When we trigger it, we pass the instance ID, so we receive it. Once you receive it, you are going to first check the instance ID is valid. Here, this is just a validation state. If it is like not found, it's an invalid one. Because this orchestration instance ID is very unique, as you will remember it. Okay, but if it is already finished running, then we can say nothing to run. But let's say it's a genuine call. So because we call this endpoint, we will make this kind of a response where instance ID and status is approved. So this is the one which is raising the event. You see this approval response? If I go to this, like I said, look at this. Somebody has to raise an event called approval response. So from this HTTP trigger, we are invoking this function. Once we invoke this, what will happen? Whatever was waiting here, let me put a breakpoint. Whatever was waiting here is done. Then we update the database. So we are invoking another method called update monitoring request status. Where is this? It is here. It's a piece of function. Again, this is an activity trigger function that does this work. It goes and updates the database as approved. Okay, approved or rejected, depends on what was sent. After this, the workflow is continuing and sending an email to the user. That is what you saw. So this is a workflow, but in this interesting part is this one. It will wait for 2 days till someone is going to trigger it. Okay, let's see if we can make this run in the local. All right, so very important thing is understanding doable function is not a big deal, right? But you need to know how to debug this. So I'm going to show you how to debug this. Because I've already developed and deployed, I have to stop this process. I have to go to this function app and have to literally stop this, because even if I'm trying to debug from local, in the function I'm pointing to the same database, so it will execute everything. So I have to stop this, and this time what we are going to do is, you see this, there is no record here and the function is running. Okay, so before I do step by step, let's go to this SQL Trigger and set up here. Let's put a breakpoint here, it will come here. Okay, and then this is the approval, so let's go put a breakpoint to this approval and rejection, and then go to this orchestration and put a breakpoint here. Okay, having set all of these breakpoints, let me show you how things works. So I'm going to go to this available slots because I deleted. Okay, so I'm going to request for the first slot. Once I submit, what will happen? So I submitted. The very first thing that happened is a record inserted into this table. Our Azure function, which is SQL Trigger function, triggered and it came. So when you run this code, there was a instance ID, so it immediately came here. The request jumps to that instance. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here, run it. So it's coming here, it's coming. Yeah, it's asynchronous, so it's jumping here and there. Okay, so let's put a breakpoint here and run it. I think I should run this. So what happened? It updated with an orchestration ID. Okay, so we know the orchestration ID, and what do we do is send email. So let's remove all of this breakpoint. It should have been sending an email and it is waiting for it. So if I execute F10, see, it is now running and waiting here. This line of code is not executed. Okay, so basically I should have got an email, which we will check right away. If I go to spam, see, I got an email. So this time, if we look at this, copy the link address. Yeah, so okay, so basically we have an approval and rejected. So how do we test this? Right, we need to have this URL formatted, right? So what we do is we go here. Okay, this is the URL, so I copy this. This is for approval. I copy this. Let's format this here. Okay, this is the URL, locally running one, instance ID. So I copy this instance ID, I place it here, copy this, and let's say I hit this. What should happen? You look at this, what happened? There was an admin approval. It triggered this. This is the one which got triggered. And then it is checking, all good. It is formatting, and just pay attention to this. We are raising an event called approval response. I'm going to run F5, but the moment this is run, what will happen? It will come to this one. Okay, I'm going to click F5. You see this endpoint came here because right now somebody has raised this. And if you look at this, we got the instance ID and approval that we just triggered. After that, we are going to update this. I'm going to put a breakpoint here and here, activity update request, which is here. So the next call will jump here. See, this is the workflow. What it is doing, it is finding out, and before I run the last step, you can see how the data is. Look at this, it's all in pending state. The moment I execute this, it's in approved state. So now if I run this, the final step is the email sending part. Now this will send email to the user. Alright, so this is how you test the durable function. And if you look at this, whatever we were testing, all sorts of logs are here, starting from the orchestration until the end. Sending email and all of those things are logged here. So anything that is used in the function, like here for example send grid, SQL, string, all of those things, right, including this app based domain, everything is configured in the portal. If you look at this portal, under the environment variable, everything is configured here. Okay, so now I go here and start this function, so everything will work when the real testing is happening. Okay, so I hope you understand this durable function orchestration. I know this is easy, at the same time it's confusing. So if you have any questions, if you did not understand a particular part, let me know in the comment section. If you like it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and we will talk more about this maybe in a real meeting. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!